And how many of you are old enough to remember the Mashup era? Show of hands. Okay, great. Well, for those of you who don't know, back in the early 2000s, developers were mixing and matching all sorts of APIs together to make these cool and unexpected applications. This was such a fun and creative time in web development. One of the most iconic mashups of that time was taking Google Maps and combining it with Craigslist. So Craigslist is where you can search for real estate, and it gives this boring kind of text-based list back. But if you combine that with Google Maps, you now can overlay the property on top of the map, and now you have this beautiful visual interactive experience. Now, I know that this doesn't sound revolutionary today, but back then, this totally blew our minds. You see, this was before Google Maps API was even a thing. This was literally a dude named Paul mashing things together to make something new. And everything was really closed back then. So being able to pull from not just one vendor, but two to create something new and exciting, this was sick. Developers started mashing Google Maps with all sorts of things, right? Crime data, local events and concerts, even restaurant recommendations. And this excitement and demand is actually what led Google to release the Google Maps API. They realized the potential of letting developers build on top of their platforms. And once Google opened the door, everyone followed, right? So other major companies, they started releasing their APIs as well, and this became the beginning of the API economy as we know it today, where there are open APIs and developers are free to build innovative solutions around these popular services. Another iconic mashup of that time was combining Twitter with Flickr. How many remember Flickr? Okay, good. So you could tweet out your latest photos directly from the Flickr app. And y'all, this was before Twitter had photo sharing, okay? So developers really pushed the envelope a lot if we look back over the trace of history. But yeah, you could, right from the Flickr app, tweet out a photo. And think about it, back then, there were no photos on the app. So if you were somebody who, all of a sudden, you have a picture in your post, cool kid, right? And it wasn't long before they started mashing up YouTube as well with Twitter, and we had video posts too. So developers, they got really creative here. There was a Netflix and a Rotten Tomatoes mashup that showed movie ratings right from your queue. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this was back before Netflix was streaming. They used to mail out the DVDs, and we had a queue. I see some head nodding. You remember this time. Back when Amazon was a virtual bookstore. Who remembers that? Okay, that's all they sold was books. And there was a mashup that would connect Amazon with library things, and this would help you organize your book collection. And then there were even mashups that scanned your iTunes library, let you know when your favorite artists were coming to town. What a time. There was no shortage of innovation and, more importantly, fun. So you might be wondering to yourself, if mashups were so amazing, then, why didn't they last? And yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit. So one of the biggest issues with mashups was the maintenance, right? APIs would change. They would get deprecated. Sometimes they would even just disappear. So one day your mashup worked perfectly. The next day it was completely broken. And keeping up with this became quite a headache for people, especially when most of them are doing this as a side project, They get excited about an idea, hack on it over Christmas break or something, put it out into the world. But because these projects were built out of curiosity, rather than commitment, then they lacked that long-term support. But I really miss the days of the Mashup era, which is why I am so excited about MCP. It's bringing back that same energy of the Mashup era, but in a way that could actually work long-term. So MCP stands for the Model Context Protocol. And it's an open standard that lets AI agents talk to different APIs, data, tools in this nice, consistent way. So you can think of this like a universal adapter. So instead of needing to custom code every API integration, you just plug in these things called MCP servers, and the agents just know how to interact with them. And so this setup makes it super easy to build mashups because everything just kind of works beautifully right outside of the box. Now, like I said, MCPs work with AI agents. And an AI agent is basically a system that takes action on your behalf. So think of your AI chatbots like ChatGPT, for example. They're conversational, and they'll tell you how to do something. So if you ask a question, it'll say, OK, step 1, step 2, step 3, and 4, and you'll go ahead and you'll do that yourself. Well, with an agent, they will actually do the action for you. So steps 1 through 4 is done if you ask it to do something for you, right? And so MCP, it isn't a requirement for AI agents. In fact, there are many companies that are building proprietary agents that work within their applications. And this is fine, you know. It lets you engage with their interface and their dashboards using natural language, and that's definitely helpful. But the moment that you need to access something outside of that application, you're out of luck. So that's the beauty of MCP. With MCP, the agents aren't boxed into a single application. They can connect to any tool or any service that also exposes itself via MCP. Kind of like the Mashup era, but instead of wiring everything together manually, the agent figures it out and it does the work for you. We are back. Fun, creative apps, but this time with less effort. So Anthropic actually launched MCP back in November 2024, and my company, Block, as well as a few others, helped them out with the spec and actually became launch partners. And let me tell you, developers are hyped.
Everyone is talking about MCPs. It's gone completely viral.
The hype is real. And a lot of that is because MCPs are completely open. Anyone can build an MCP server, even if you are not the provider of that API. There's SDKs to do so in TypeScript, in Rust, in Python, in Java, Kotlin, and C#. And the servers themselves are open source. They're LLM agnostic, so they can work with any model you want, and they're agent agnostic, so you're not locked into a single agent. You can use an MCP server, like one given one, across any AI agent. So it's not even been a year yet, and there's already this massive ecosystem of MCP servers, about 5,000 of them to be in fact. And the wild part of this is that only about 10% of these are built by the vendors themselves. The rest are made by everyday developers, just like my guy Paul from the Mashup days. So developers everywhere are seeing the potential, and they are jumping on board. And as go the developers, so do the companies. So in the last couple of months, we've seen an explosion of support from companies for MCP because they realize, y'all, we're doing this with or without them, so they might as well join the party. Now, MCP is also on every major tech CEO's mind and was a major focus of all of the big conferences this year. So like I said, the hype is very much so real, but let's not rely on hype alone, okay? Let's actually look at some fun MCP mashups. So I'm going to use Goose, which is an open source AI agent that's built as an MCP client. That means it can work with any of the 5,000 MCP servers that are out there, and Goose lets you choose whichever LLM you want. So we are really seeing the full potential of MCP here. So let's create one of the most iconic mashups of the early 2000s, but with MCPs. So I asked Goose to make an interactive map of restaurants nearby, and it first uses the Google Maps MCP to get the location, and then to also search for some nearby restaurants. And then once it has this data, it uses the developer MCP to write the web page, and then a computer controller to open it in a browser. And there you have it. we have an interactive map of nearby restaurants, all done in about 30 seconds. So with just one natural language prompt, Goose mashed up several tools, right? We saw the Google Maps MCP to get the data. It also used another tool which wasn't an MCP server, the OpenStreetMap API and Leaflet.js to provide those map tiles, and then a developer MCP to create the application, and then a computer controller MCP to control your computer and open that app in the browser. Y'all, this is the modern day mashup. We're combining data from various APIs and local tools without manually wiring those together. Let's look at another mashup. So here's a Figma design, and to access this from my AI agent, I need the Figma MCP. So I'm going to install this. I'm going to provide it with my Figma access token. And I also have a couple of other MCPs installed, like developer and computer controller. So let's make a mashup that asks Goose to take that Figma file and then use the developer MCP to actually create the website using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Within less than a minute, Goose has mashed these together to complete my task, right? So now let's go ahead and mash it with a computer controller MCP and have Goose open the website. And as you can see, the site looks just like the design. So with my MCPs, the agents handle combining the tools, integrating those services, getting them all working together. And this integration is not something that I, the developer, need to maintain. At any given time, I can ask my agent to do something like this, and even if any of these MCPs change, it's just going to grab the latest version and figure out how to work with it. And this is why I am so excited about MCPs. They're dynamic, they're flexible, and y'all, they're just plain fun. I'm really having a blast. So let's see how else we can use MCP to simplify our developer lives. How about setting up a new project? This is a practical task that we all can relate to, right? So I want to set up this Get diagram project locally, and it has an extensive stack complete with front-end, back-end, database, deployment, you name it. And there's some great instructions here on how to clone the repo, how to install the dependencies, how to configure the environment, spin up the container, start the database. But this is a lot of manual work, and I don't think I should have to do it. So I'm going to give it to Goose, and I'm going to spend my time on some better things. So Goose is using the GitHub MCP to get the instructions from the README file. It goes on to clone the repo. It's checking if PNPM is installed, which it isn't. Goose takes care of that for me, then installs the dependencies. It sets up the required environment variables. It attempts to spin up a Docker container, but it notices that Docker isn't running. So it prompts me to authenticate, which I don't mind doing manually because, y'all, I'm not giving the agents my passwords, okay? So Goose notices Docker is running, gets right back to work. The next step is to start the database. It notices a little snag here. It's not set up. It doesn't have a password. Goose doesn't bother with me with that. It figures it out, fixes it up for me, and gets right back to work. And this last step is just to start the front-end server. So I'm going to go ahead and test Goose's work by checking localhost in a browser. Let's see what happens. Voila, the environment is successfully set up in less than 2 minutes, I might add. So Goose finishes off by letting me know the ports that everything is running on, and it also tells me that I'll need to add some API keys in my .env file, which it was unable to access because I blocked it using something that's called Goose Ignore, kind of like Git Ignore. I'm basically saying don't touch those files. And with the GitHub and the developer MCP mashup, we're able to automate common developer tasks right on the fly. So we've seen some cool mashups, but I want us to take a step back and let's look at how all of this actually works. So this is a dead simple MCP server. I just want you to see the structure of it all, okay? So there is an official TypeScript SDK available in the Model Context Protocol GitHub org. However, community members have been making these fast MCP SDKs that make MCP development even simpler. I'm telling you, this is really a community-driven effort. So we create an MCP server instance, we give it a name, we give it a version. This is basically the identity of the MCP server. And then next you're going to want to add tools, okay? So tools are one of the most important aspects of agentic AI. Tool calling is what enables the AI agent to actually make API calls or take actions on your behalf, okay? So we add a name and we add a description for the tool. Listen to me, if you don't take anything else from this talk, don't foobar this part, okay? You want to be very mindful of your description because this is what's giving the agent context on if this is the tool I should even use for the given task, okay? And then next are the parameters. Just like a function. This is nothing new to you, right? If you want a tool to do something, sometimes you might have to provide a couple of arguments. So this is specifying that 2 numbers are needed when calling this tool. And then you provide a body specifying what happens when this tool is actually called. And you can add as many of these tools as you need to. Not too much now, but you can do it. You can add a few more if you want. So here's a realistic tool within the GitHub MCP. So this one fetches the latest commit message for a given owner in a repo. So the name of this tool is Get Latest Commit, right? Pretty good job. And then there's a nice, clear description, which helps the LLM know the purpose of this tool. And then in the execute function, there's the API call. And it returns the latest commit message. So you all are already equipped. You can build an MCP server today. And then I want to show you what's going on even behind the scenes a little bit more. So we have the user, which is you, right? And the agent, which is an MCP client like Goose, which has access to tools that are part of installed MCP servers. And then we have the LLM, which is used to make the decisions. So the user gives the agent a natural language prompt, something like I did when I said, set up my environment. This sounds simple enough, but there's quite a few steps, if you really think about it, involved in setting up a directory, right? We need to initialize the repo, we need to create the README, we need to commit the changes. And so the agent takes that prompt, it sends it to the LLM, along with the list of the available tools from the MCP servers, right? And these tools are from the MCP servers that are enabled. Not all that are installed, but the ones that are enabled. So this list can get quite long if you have a bunch of MCP servers enabled, and many of them may not be relevant to the task at hand. So as a user, you can add as many MCP servers as you want to your agent, but I advise you not to have them all enabled at the same time because every MCP can have multiple tools, giving the LLM this gigantic list of tools. Some may overlap with one another. This can cause confusion. This is going to give you a slower response time because your agent needs to read through all these tools and pick the right one. And it's also going to eat up your LLM tokens. So instead, when you start a session, enable the MCPs that might be relevant for that task. And if you're using Goose, Goose will take care of this for you. You don't even need to think about it. So the LLM interprets the prompt that it was given, right? It evaluates that list of tools, and then it decides which tool call should be made, and it shares that decision back to the agent. Now, here's, again, where those tool descriptions from the MCP come in quite handy because that gave the LLM enough context to make a decision on whether to use it or not. And then the agent executes the tool call, and it informs the LLM of the results, and it also updates the user on what's going on. And that was just one step of that task. Remember, there's quite a few steps to set up the environment. So this loop is going to continue until the task is completed. And this is what they call an agentic loop. Now, the beauty here, though, is that you don't have to worry about how all of this gets stitched together. I know you all are nerds like me, which is why I humored you and gave you the background details, but you don't need to know this stuff, right? The LLM is going to take care of the thinking, the agent is going to orchestrate everything, and these tools will be dynamically chosen and managed by your agent. So there's a lot of places where you can find directories of MCPs, or as I like to call it, the MCP toy store, because I quite literally feel like a kid in a candy store anytime I go browsing for MCPs. So Glamour AI has a report card feature, which I really like. I go here when I need to suss out an MCP. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's the Wild Wild West right now because this is very new and it's very open and it's very community driven. You all know everybody in the community is not our friend, right? And so there are some nefarious actors and things like that. So you want to be careful. Fortunately, with this report card feature, you can see what is the security score, what is the quality like? Is this of high quality? Is it licensed appropriately, right? And this report card is regenerated every time there's an update to the repo. And then there's Post MCP, which is my favorite. I love how clean the UX is on this site. And you can see some indicators of the popularity of an MCP server by the GitHub stars and number of downloads and stuff. And then Block, my company, is working with GitHub and Post MCP on an official MCP registry service, which is a unified catalog of MCP servers that can be discovered programmatically by your agents. So with MCPs, we're bringing back that creative spark from the early 2000s, but in a way that is practical for modern development. So whether it's for productivity, creativity, or just plain fun, the flexibility of MCP means that you can do more now with less effort. And the coolest part is that it's not just the big companies that are driving this. In fact, one of the most exciting things about Goose is how much of it has already been shaped by the community. But today we want to take that to the next level. We're announcing an independent team that's fully dedicated to supporting and growing Goose as an open, community-driven AI agent. They have the autonomy and the independence to work directly with you all, the community, to push the project in directions that make sense for the entire ecosystem, not just for us at Block. And because at its core, Goose is for builders, right? And we want to make it easier for anyone to become a builder. That's why very soon we'll be launching a grant program to support and fund open source contributors who add new features, who improve the project, who bring new, fresh ideas. And this is your chance to help and shape the future of agentic AI. So if you want to be notified the moment the grant program goes live, go ahead and scan the QR code to subscribe, or you can visit at bit.ly/subscribe-goose-grant. We cannot wait to see what you all build next. Thank you so much.